Flowers are basically four whorls. They're four concentric circles. So like if we're looking at a flower from inside, the outer whorl is called the calyx, and I'll draw a side view too. Now this is the part that encloses the bud and protects it. So the outer green part of the flower is the, let's see, each individual is called a sepal, and together they're the calyx. Okay, so this is like if they're fused is the calyx. So if we look at, let's see, there's some good plants here. These are good. These have, the flowers mostly have fallen off, and you can see a couple flowers on top. Excuse me, and what we're looking at is the calyx that has 5 lobes, or 5 sepals. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the next layer of a flower are the petals.
No, it's okay. No, just pass it. Well, yeah. I have never done
I feel like I need some kind of bearing for those questions.
It's like a star.
Oh yeah, that's the sepal.
Calyx.
That's the calyx.
And that's the flower. Yeah, I don't understand that the sepal is the whole thing. I never understood that.
Okay, so good question. So what it is that the sepal are the individual, let's say, parts. But sometimes you can't, like sometimes the sepals are fused together, and so you have to call it something when it's fused together. You don't call it sepals, you call it a calyx. So a calyx is composed of sepals.
Okay.
Calyx, composed of sepals.
And so
does that
in
make
the
sense?
case of this, the 5 lobes is the calyx.
The calyx is 5 lobed.
Has 5 lobes.
Composed of 5 fused sepals.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sepals. Okay.
Excellent.
Great.
Okay, so we have our sepals, and then this is our petals, which most people know what a petal is. But when a petal is fused together, it becomes it's called a corolla. So this is when they're fused together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So plants are kind of like people. Like when they get ready to have sex, they dress up for like the big party of spring. And so like you might say the petals are like their pretty flower dress for spring. So the petals are attracting the pollinators. That's the whole purpose of it. Like, come help me have sex. Because they're rooted in the ground. We talked about how their roots pull in the water up through their trunks. So because they're rooted in the ground, they can't walk over to another flower and say, hey, baby, let's get it on, because they're rooted in the ground. And they want to have genetic diversity. They want to spread their genetics out. So they need to help from the animal world. Sometimes plants will use wind to help spread their DNA, but in that case, they don't need petal dresses. And in fact, the petal dresses often impede the flow of this pollen through the air. So you can look at a plant, and if it has a lot of flowers and a lot of stamens that don't have petals, it's probably wind pollinated, and we'll see some Anyway, so the petals are the advertising. Hey, come help pollinate me. And so the sex parts of the plant are, the next whorl are the stamens. Okay. And this is, let's see. I'm going to put a filament on here. Okay, so this is a stamen. The plural of stamen is stamens, like the plural of shamans. Shaman is shamans. So, but this is a stamen, and it's composed of a anther and a male part. Right? This is the male part, yeah. So, anther and filament. Okay. So the anther contains the pollen. And the filament is just the stalk that holds the anther up. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? Male part is the stamen composed of the anther and the filament. Okay. So, and then the female part is female part is called the pistil, P-I-S-T-I-L. And inside the, let's see here, hold on a second. So this is the ovary. This is the style, and this is the stigma. Okay, so basically the stigma is the sticky receptive part that the pollen lands on. All right, so the pollen gets on the stigma from some insect. This is sticky. I always think it's so interesting that something that is female and out there and sticky is stigmatized. Mm-hmm. Right? How did they get that name? Mm-hmm. So the pollen lands here, and then the pollen comes in here, and then the pollen grain actually grows a tube through this style and goes down here. And each pollen grain, so another one comes in, and each pollen grain kind of comes in and pollinates each of these ovules. And let's see, so this is, these little things right here are ovules. And it's sort of like, ovaries having eggs, right? Your ovary has eggs, and this ovary has ovules, and when the pollen comes in and hits these ovules, they get fertilized and they become seeds. Does that make sense? So they become seeds, and then what happens, right? So the plant is trying to get pollinators to come in and pollinate this flower. So how does it do it? It basically makes nectar and sort of puts some nectar down here or somewhere in the base of the plant, which is sugar water. And so then the insects come in and they're like, they want the sugar water, and then they kind of get hit by these anthers and the pollen gets on them, and then they come in and eat the nectar, and then they go to another plant in which they're carrying that pollen, and then they pollinate that second plant. So, and there's all sorts of amazing, cool stories about how pollination happens. Like there's this one orchid that it mimics a bee.
Female wasp.
Female wasp. It mimics a female wasp so completely through scent, texture, and texture. There's another one too. That
looks like them too.
Looks like, exactly, yeah, it looks like them. So that the wasp actually prefers mating with the orchid than with its own kind. So it goes in and actually like has sex with this orchid, and the orchid is just like completely taking advantage of this wasp, right? It's like, oh yeah, cool, you know, and it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe the wasp is having a great time. I don't know. But anyway, so plants have all sorts of ways of making it, all sorts of ways of getting animals to pollinate them, which is fascinating. Like the caffeine plants like coffee. So they have determined that insects really prefer the nectar that's got caffeine in it, so that the insects will actually become more loyal to the coffee plant, and they'll come and because you want your insect to be loyal, because you don't want it going off to another species or a whole other type of plant because it's got that pollen on it, right? So you want the plants are invested in having you be loyal to that particular species. So the caffeine makes these plants, the insects, sort of loyal, and they just kind of keep coming back for the caffeine. And so they're getting a buzz, they're getting really amped up, but it turns out that they're actually less productive in their hive. And insects, bees that are feeding on coffee plants are actually making less honey, but they still are drawn towards the coffee plants because they're getting high.
So they're like thinking they're multitasking, but they're not.
Exactly like humans. Yeah, that's what's going on.
Oh my God, I can get so much done because I've got so much energy, but they're actually not doing as much.
Exactly. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, so there's all sorts of cool pollination tricks. But so here's the thing. So now the plant just had its sex and reproduction has happened. So the plant no longer needs its pretty petal dress. So the pretty petal dress falls off, and like it no longer needs its anthers. All right. And now we have this ovary, and we have these pollinated ovules, which will become seeds. And now the plant pumps its sugar energy into this ovary. And the ovary ripens and ripens.
Wait, so if you come for the flower now and you're ringing its doorbell, there's no anther?
Yes. Or it's just... yes. Exactly. Or it's just withered, like can't really anther.
Come in, I'm sorry, I can't anther.
So then, you know, this ovary swells and swells and swells, and then the plant pumps it up with sugary nectar, lots of sugar, and that becomes your fruits. And every